Hey, my friend, Dr. Lee Warren here with you for another episode of the podcast. I'm so grateful to be back with you today. Today, we're going to talk about switching things up, how to rewire your brain, and the fact that rewiring your brain starts with thinking about rewiring your brain. What does that mean? We're going to get into it today. We're going to talk about the fact that your mind creates your brain, that the term rewiring is popular and sort of accurate, but maybe not in the way that you think. And we're going to talk about what I call the patchbay concept because it's so helpful in thinking of the life-changing power you have to operate your mind-brain interface as it's designed. Okay, before we get into the episode, I just want to take a second and scrub in with you. I want you to scrub in to this self-brain surgery operation that we're getting ready to do. And let me know in the comments, if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment or send me an email, contact@drleewarren.com. Let me know if you like this scrubbing in process. I think it's helpful. But if you don't like it, we don't have to do it. I'm putting it in here as a way for us to say together that we need to get our minds on the ground we're about to cover. So when we scrub in, we spend 6 minutes at the scrub sink washing our hands and cleaning ourselves of anything that might contaminate the patient or anything from the outside that I'm going to drag into the operating room and cause an infection or a problem. But it's not just washing my hands. I'm spending 6 minutes clearing my mind and getting myself focused and ready for the operation that's about to happen because my patient deserves my full attention. And friend, in this operating room of self-brain surgery, you're the patient and you're the doctor. And you deserve your full attention and presence to be here and be ready to learn everything you can to help you change your mind and change your life. So just spend that few minutes, get you some deep breaths. We're not going to go through the whole abide process today. The last 2 episodes, I did that for you. But just take a minute, take a deep breath. Allow yourself to hold that breath and then let it out slowly. You're getting that parasympathetic vagal nerve activation, which is going to calm your heart rate. It's going to lower your cortisol. It's going to help your brain get into more of an alpha, relaxed state and off that hyper-focused beta state that we're in all the time when we're paying attention to things from a left brain standpoint and everything's a fact and everything's two-dimensional and everything's a decision that has to be made. What we want to do right now is just take a minute and breathe that out and let it go and convince yourself that you can control your breathing and your heart rate. And therefore, that means that your mind can tell your brain to take command of your physiology. And you really do have the capacity to change your mind and change your life with that. So that scrubbing in process, just a second, you can do it in your mind in seconds. You don't have to take 6 minutes to do it. But just do that for a minute. And now we're going to talk about the mind-brain interface. Understanding how to get this system working for you instead of against you. That's what we're going to get into today, my friend. We're going to get some self-brain surgery done. Before we do any of that, I have a question for you. Are you ready to get after it? Welcome to the Self-Brain Surgery Podcast, where neuroscience meets faith to bring real, measurable change to your life. I'm Dr. Lee Warren, board-certified neurosurgeon and author. On this show, we explore cutting-edge brain science, mental resilience, and how faith and mindset work together to shape your health and your happiness. If you're ready to take control of your thoughts and rewire your brain for hope, you're in the right place. Real change isn't easy, but it's always worth it. Remember, you can't change your life until you change your mind. Let's get after it. Let's talk about outlets for a minute. You know the outlets on the wall or on the nightstand in a hotel or when you go to plug something in, you got outlets all over your house, right? Well, there's sort of 3 problems with outlets. Number 1 is that they're not always where you need them to be. When we bought this house, for example, it was built by Dale Margaret's brilliant guy, built his own house, and Dale put the outlets where he needed them to be. But that was 30 years ago, and now lots more things run on power than they did before. So it was really common after we moved in and put the furniture around the house and did a remodel and all of that, that we figured out that we didn't have outlets everywhere we needed them. And so we called Tyler. Tyler Meyer is an electrician. He runs a company in North Platte, Nebraska here called Bullseye Electric. This is not a commercial for Tyler. It's just the fact that he's our electrician. He's our go-to guy when we need something. So shout out to Tyler if you're listening. Tyler's a fellow bereaved father and just a really good guy, and he always comes and takes care of whatever we need on the electrical side. And we'd call Tyler and say, hey, we need an outlet over here, we need an outlet over there, we need more outlets than we have, and Tyler would knock it out. And out in our shop, we had a problem because we noticed that often we need to plug more than two or three things into the same outlet and we wouldn't be able to. So you have to make a choice. You want this plugged in or that plugged in. You can't plug them both in. And the third problem is that you can overload a circuit and cause a power failure. And so if you try to use a power strip, for example, and plug too many things into the same outlet, you can blow a fuse or blow an outlet and have to go to the breaker box and turn everything back on. And Lisa, my wife, who's an amazing athlete, loves to do what's called Bikram yoga. Bikram yoga is a type of yoga where you get in this inflatable dome or in a special room. She's got a blow-up dome, and you can heat that thing up to like 100 degrees. I forget how, 102 or 103, something like that. It gets really super hot in there. So the yoga is really hard and very hot. But guess what? In order to do that, you have to use space heaters, and space heaters draw a tremendous amount of power out of the outlet. And so every time she would try to use the yoga dome, she would blow an outlet or blow a fuse or blow a breaker, and we'd have to go and reset the breaker box. So then we started running extension cords to outlets all over the shop. We got this big 40 by 80 foot shop that Dale built, and it's wonderful. We got the front third of it. The north third of it is our workout area. We got all our gym equipment and golf simulator and treadmill and all that stuff back there. And the back 2/3 of the shop is where we have all the tractor and all the lawn mowers and all that sort of gear, and some workbench and areas where we do some mechanical work from time to time. And so we'd run extension cords to outlets all over that shop. But what we noticed is that none of them could handle the load from one of those space heaters. So we'd blow a breaker. And so we called Tyler, and he came in and put some reinforced bigger outlets and reinforced breakers, and we put some air conditioners and some other stuff in the shop that required different wiring of the power. And we had to do all that because outlets and circuit breakers can only handle so much load. And if you need more, you've got to rewire your house or your shop. And so we'd call Tyler, and Tyler would come take care of it. But I want you to do a little thought experiment with me today. We're not going to talk about power outlets the whole conversation here, but I want you to do a thought experiment with me for a second. What if you could, let's say you go to a hotel, right? And you and your spouse both have phones and maybe Apple Watches or maybe iPads or computers or something else that needs to be plugged in at night where you're sleeping. And only one of those bedside tables in the hotel has a power outlet. It's usually just one or two plugs, sometimes a USB outlet, right? And a lot of the hotels, there's no power outlet on the other side. And so you can't charge everything that you need to charge, or you have to put it in some other part of the hotel room. Or there's an outlet, but it's way up underneath the bed, and it's inconvenient, right? So just imagine if you could go to that hotel room and you could just look at the room and you could decide where the outlets needed to be and just think about an outlet being in the right place, and all of a sudden one would materialize there where you needed it, or the outlet would move across the wall and it would show up where you needed it. That'd be very helpful, wouldn't it? And imagine also if you could just think about an outlet needing to have, say, 4 plugs instead of 2, and all of a sudden 2 more plugs would show up and just show up right in front of you, and you could plug 4 things into the outlet instead of just 2. That would be very helpful, right? And now imagine if you could think about an outlet and it would reinforce its connections to handle a bigger load. Like if you thought, okay, I'm going to need to plug a space heater into this outlet, and it's going to blow the fuse, it will blow the breaker box, and so I need to reinforce that outlet. Well, what if when you thought that, the wiring and the breaker box and everything just reinforced itself, and you didn't have to call Tyler? Well, Tyler would be out of business. It'd be sad for Tyler, but it would be very convenient for us, right? If you could just think about something you needed from your electrical grid. Imagine if we could do that for the whole country. If you thought, if your civil engineers could think, or your power grid managers of your city could think, gosh, it's getting hot, and summertime's coming, we're going to have a lot more people turning on their air conditioners, so we really need the power grid to get more robust for the next 4 months. And what if when they thought that, the whole power grid just laid down more lines, generated more gigawatts of electricity, and could handle that bigger load without anybody having to go and build another tower or power station or any of that, without having to produce any more coal or more nuclear power, more wind farms? What if you could just think about the power grid and it would get more robust? What would have to happen in order for those things to occur? Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff that would have to happen if that was the case. So number one, the wires inside the wall and the structure of the outlets and the drywall in the wall and the breakers in the breaker box would have to be responsive somehow to your thoughts, right? They'd have to have antennas or some kind of wiring, some kind of system to be able to pick up on those mental signals that you were sending and to respond to them in a way, and to have some mechanism, some tools, some built-in ability to make the changes that you were thinking that you needed to make. And that, in other words, they had to have some ability to detect my intention or direction and then make structural, not metaphorical, not imaginary changes, but real ones, structural ones, to themselves in real time based on my mental command. So you imagine you're in that hotel room and you say, okay, I really need another outlet on this bedside table, and boom, it happens. That means that somehow the wiring inside the wall could detect your thinking and begin in real time to respond to it, to open up a hole in the wall and put an outlet there, a physical outlet that could be plugged into. The drywall around that repaired itself. The wiring on the inside, the circuit breaker got more robust so that it wouldn't blow and you wouldn't put too much load on it. And all that happened in real time in response to your thinking. Then there would have to be some sort of mechanism by which that was able to occur, right? Because it wouldn't be magic. It would be, there was some system in place that was designed by some really smart person to interpret your thoughts and respond with the electrical grid getting changed in response to your thoughts, your attention, and your intention, right? Well, guess what? That's how your brain works, except that it's way cooler than that. It's not just electrical outlets and drywall. So what happens when you think about something? Let's say you decide that you're going to learn how to play chess or speak Russian or take up quilting or some new thing. You say to your brain, inside your mind or out loud, you say, I'm going to learn how to do this thing. I'm going to learn how to download a podcast. I'm going to learn how to crochet, whatever it is. Within seconds of you telling your brain that you intend to do that thing, there's a structure in your brain called microtubules. And microtubules are these little tubes. They're microtubes. That's why they're called microtubules. And they form the structural element that neurons and synapses and neurons and dendrites and axons can grow through to create synapses to connect different nerve cells and begin to accomplish wiring changes inside the brain. Those microtubules form within seconds of thinking about something that you intend to do. In other words, your brain is out there listening for your mind to say, here's what I need you to get done. When you think about working out, for example, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to do some bicep curls. Within seconds, your brain makes microtubules to start to make synaptic connections with the motor cortex and all the nerves down to your arms to prepare to be more efficient and robust when you need to perform the task that you tell it that you're about to need to perform. So your brain starts anticipating the structural elements it's going to need in order to obey your mental command and pay attention to the right things and direct the structural changes that need to be accomplished. That's amazing, isn't it? Within seconds, those new neuronal connections and synapses begin to be laid down by microtubular guidance. And those microtubules have some sort of quantum, faster than speed of light, and non-local, which means they're not directly connected to your mental system. They perceive your mental input, and they start to lay down the tracks that the synapses are going to form along when those neural circuits begin to develop. These turn over, by the way, microtubules from creation to their death and repurposing last about 10 minutes. So that means every 10 minutes, your brain is laying down structural pipe, laying down grid work to prepare to make new neural connections. And the baseline, the default position is that those neural connections just reform the same ones that have already been there unless you give it new intention and new thought. But the system's constantly listening, constantly preparing to make these changes. And those well-formed neural pathways, they develop within hours of repetition. So when you tell it you're going to do something, it begins to get ready. Then when you start doing that thing, it begins to say, okay, we're doing this thing. I need to lay down some more connections. Just like in the shop, if I plug in another space heater, the system's got to get more robust or the circuit's going to blow, right? So the brain says, okay, well, if we're lifting stuff with our muscles, then I need to lay down more neurons to make it easier to lift stuff with our muscles and be more responsive. And so you start laying down more. So within hours, those pathways begin to form and get more robust. And guess what? They persist unless there's weeks of disuse. Okay, so they begin to form within minutes to hours, and they persist even within weeks of not being used. And that's why certain habits are really hard to break, by the way, because once you've got a well-formed mental connection, a synaptic pathway, a highway, you've followed Hebb's law, and neurons that fire together have wired together. Once you've done that, then you form this really deep highway. Then even after weeks of disuse, the highway's still there because your brain says, hey, we needed this before, we might need it again. And so you hold on to that pathway for a long time. And there are even traces of it for years afterwards. That's why it's so easy to fall back into a habit that you used to have if you started up again after a long time of not doing it. When I was first podcasting and recording music, I bought all the right gear. I had all the switches, the preamps, the amplifiers, the microphones, the cables. I bought everything I needed to connect my computer to all this hardware. And I could plug my guitar in or plug a microphone in. I could record whatever I needed. And I had all this gear, and I had great ideas for books and podcasts and songs, but I had a problem. My recording was very inefficient, and it was frustrating for me because I would get so wrapped up in the technical stuff, that sort of part of my brain that needed to be technical and thinking about engineering and wiring and software operation and all of that stuff. I would get so down in the technical details that I couldn't ever be as creative as I needed to be or wanted to be. And so it'd be frustrating. And I solved the problem when we built what we thought was going to be our forever house back in Casper before we moved to Nebraska, because we didn't know at the time we built that beautiful home in March. We moved in March of 2019, and we ended up moving again in May of 2020. So we built that house thinking we were going to be there forever. And I built my studio, and I finally got all that gear wired in, thinking I was going to be there forever. I bought 4 devices. They're called patchbays. And these patchbays were the thing that finally unlocked everything for me. Because before I had a patchbay, like if I had a particular piece of gear, like a preamp, a preamp is a device where you plug your guitar or your microphone into it, and it takes the electrical signal and kind of gets it ready and passes it on to the amplifier and conditions the electricity right so it sounds good, EQs it right so it'll be proper to go into the amplifier, and then it'll sound good when it's used. And so I would have a preamp that sounded good with a particular microphone. So if I was going to record my voice, it might need one preamp or one microphone. If I was going to record Lisa, I might need a different one to sound the best. And before I had a patch bay, I would literally have to crawl up under the desk where I had all this gear mounted. And I would have to have Lisa thread a cable to me, and I would have a flashlight down there in some precarious position, and I would switch one cable from a preamp to a different amplifier to a different input, and I'd be switching cables and finally get it all ready so I could go record. And then inevitably the hospital would call or something would happen, a kid would need some help or something would occur, and I wouldn't have much time left after I spent all that time in that technical mode. And so it'd be frustrating. And so for years, I didn't get a lot done. My podcasting was sort of a hobby. I would do an episode every month or something. I would get down there and try to work, and I'd get caught up in some technical thing, and I couldn't get my brain on the creative side. I couldn't write, and I couldn't record music, and it was just really frustrating because I was stuck in that technical mode of trying to get everything connected all the time in the right way. But once I got the patch bays, what that allowed me to do, a patch bay is a device where on the front there's all kinds of different plug-ins. You can plug a microphone in, you plug 7 or 8 different cables in, and on the back, it passes through where whatever's plugged into the front, you can hook another cable up in the back, and then you can hook that cable up anywhere else. But if you change on the front where one of those cables goes, you can plug it into a different slot and have it go to a different output. So then I could have all my outputs connecting all my gear, and all I had to do if I wanted to play a guitar into one preamp or a microphone into another is switch one little cable in the front of a patch bay. And so all of a sudden I had this amazing control of all that gear was ready to go and powered up and fired up and connected to the computer. And all I had to do was say, okay, for this song or this podcast, I want this preamp into that amplifier with that guitar or that microphone. Boom, boom, boom. I had the cables done. And all of a sudden I've got that rest of that time to be creative and to generate whatever I needed to do. And so guess what happened? All of a sudden, I was super creative. I turned my podcast from a hobby into this endeavor that's now heard in 150 countries every week, all around the world. The patchbay allowed me to direct the flow of my information in an easy way so I could flourish in the studio, which led, like I said, to the podcast taking off, from turning it from a hobby into an almost professional endeavor where I began to write more. I've written 3 books since then. I was able to start making some music again and doing all the things that really freed me up in my mental space to create all the things that I now bring to you. That happened because of the patchbays. And so what I want you to understand, friend, is that your thoughts serve as a patchbay for your brain. You can instantly direct your thoughts to structurally change the way your brain is wiring itself in real time. Now, I want to say just for a second, we often talk about rewiring our brains. And we have this thought that our brains are kind of this fixed structure that's formed by our genetics, by our upbringing, by our traumas and dramas and injuries and illnesses and all the things that have happened to us in our life. And our brain's kind of stuck, and we just need to learn how to think about it differently and work with it differently. And sometimes when we say rewire, we sort of mean that in a metaphorical way, that I want to learn how to kind of get my brain to act a little different. I'm sort of stuck with the general form of it, but I want to sort of work around it in the best way that I can. And so I want to kind of rewire my thoughts on that. And we think about it in this metaphorical way. But I want you to understand today that you can literally, structurally direct your thoughts to change the way your brain is wiring itself in real time. That's why I call it self-brain surgery. You can add robustness and resilience to mental circuits that you need to use more often and begin to break down old ones and old patterns of behavior that are no longer serving you well. You see, the more we learn from neuroscience, the more we see how Scripture had it right all along. You're not stuck the way you've always been, because you're making and repurposing microtubules all the time. In fact, when you started this podcast, your brain said, okay, we're going to go into learning mode now. And your brain began to lay down microtubules to help you wire in some new habits and new ideas and new things that you're going to be listening to. Your brain is not structurally the same as it was 20 minutes and 13 seconds ago when we started this conversation, because you're always making and repurposing microtubules that are responsive to your thoughts, that somehow, unlike the wiring in your wall, can hear when you need a new outlet, when you need a new connection, and they instantly begin to lay down the groundwork for those structural changes. They're entangled with your thoughts, listening to your attention, your intention, and your mental direction, and they are reinforcing what you tell your brain to care about. You are literally, my friend, creating your brain all the time, rather than being given the brain that you're going to have for the rest of your life and having to live with it by genetics or upbringing, trauma or drama or tragedy or massive thing. This insight, this is a warning for you, a warning and opportunity at the same time. The old phrase, the king's hand strikes and gives a rose. So here's a blessing and a curse, okay? With this insight comes great responsibility. Because once you know that you have the ability to structurally change your brain, you're now a surgeon and not just a helpless patient anymore. Once you know that you don't have to live like you've been living, then failing to take the reins and change your life becomes a form of self-malpractice. And all of a sudden, friend, you're violating our first commandment of self-brain surgery. I will relentlessly refuse to participate in my own demise. Say that with me. I must relentlessly refuse to participate in my own demise. Okay? Once you know that your feelings and thoughts are not reliable, that feelings aren't facts, they're chemical events, and that thoughts aren't always true. In fact, 80% of the time they're not, and that you're not forced to react to your feelings and thoughts as you always have, then commandments number 2 and number 3 demand a change. Knowing that your brain isn't static, that it's actually constantly changing and it's actively listening for you to tell it what to care about and how to behave, then you have to buy in to the 4th commandment of self-brain surgery. I must believe that my mind is in charge of my brain, and that, so once you understand that your mind is in charge of your brain and your brain's just listening for instruction. Your brain's just listening. It's waiting for you to tell it what to care about, what to pay attention to, and what structural changes it needs to make to give you the life that you're telling it that you want to have. Now, I'm going to pause for just a second here because somebody's going to email me. 100%. Somebody's going to email me in the next 24 hours. I get one of these at least every day. And somebody's going to say, hey, I love what you talk about with self-brain surgery and all these things, but what if I have ADHD? Does it work if I have obsessive compulsive? Does it work if I'm anxious? Does it work if I've been through this particular type of trauma? If I've been a victim of a sexual assault? If I have abandonment issues? If I have betrayal trauma? Does it work if my kid had a head injury when they were 9 or my child is autistic? Does it work for them? And here's what I'm going to tell you to answer that question very carefully, because again, sometimes you need a therapist, sometimes you need a psychiatrist, sometimes you need a mental health professional, medication, sometimes you need brain surgery, sometimes you need thyroid medicine. Sometimes I'm just reminding you always, if things aren't working well, go see your doctor, go see your provider, make sure there's not a medical issue, make sure you don't need some other kind of help. It's okay. It's right if you do, okay? So when somebody asks me that question, with all those other caveats, I have to say this: all human brains, and we talked to Michael Egner the other day on the podcast, go back and listen. I've seen many as a neurosurgeon, so is he, people born with significant structural brain abnormalities, half their brain missing, very little brain structure present in the brain, and they grow up to be normal people. We've seen it in tremendous research with stroke victims who lose tremendous numbers of neurons and half their brain volume dies, and they can go through certain kinds of rehab and they can learn how to walk again, and they can learn how to put different parts of their brain in charge of what they lost. And so all human brains work in the same way. They are consent to automate structures. What that means is your brain is waiting for you to tell it what it is supposed to automate to make things easier for you. It's asking your permission, and it uses feelings and thoughts to do that sound like you, to say, hey, last time we encountered something similar to this is what you had us do. Is that what you want us to do again? And that loop, that consent to automate, I'm asking for consent in order to automate something so you don't have to think about it. That becomes habitual over time, and you don't have to even mentally process those things anymore. So all brains do that. The difference is, if you have a head injury, if you're autistic, if you're on the spectrum somewhere, if you have a particular Enneagram type, if you have a particular personality, if you've been through a certain set of things, whatever it is, okay? Whatever it is, your brain will present to you a different baseline of things that feel real, thoughts that sound real and sound trustworthy in your voice. They will bring up and commingle memories and emotional feelings that will make you think that what you're experiencing is real and true. So all of us have some sort of baseline and a worldview and a filter set based on our genetics, upbringing, background, history, all that will present to us some things that feel like we need to react to them in a certain way. All of us, everybody, that's what human brains do. So the difference is self-brain surgery is this process of pausing long enough to biopsy those thoughts and feelings and to use that metacognition, that ability to get out of being the subject of your own thoughts and feelings and just say, okay, I'm going to anticipate. This is how you can teach your kids, or if you're a therapist, this is how you can teach your patients what self-brain surgery really is. The superpower is to spend some time thinking and anticipating events that you're going to face and say, I know from experience that when I'm in a particular situation, or somebody sends me a particular text message, or I see a particular post on Instagram, I tend to react in a certain way. I tend to feel certain things. I tend to hear certain thoughts. And so since I know that, I need to begin to put some space in between the stimulus of those feelings and thoughts and the response of how I react. And I need to then take command of that space. That's what 2 Corinthians 10:5 says. Take your thoughts captive, okay? So no matter what your baseline is, what your identity, your background, your personality type, your disorder that you may have, all of those things can become something that you can learn to make a subject-object shift about. So stop being the subject of what you're experiencing and go up in the balcony and look down on the stage of your own life and be able to say, okay, this is what I tend to experience in that setting. And so rather than letting the play out like it always has, I'm going to interrupt, biopsy the thought, decide a more helpful to me and therefore to others strategy for how I'm going to respond instead of react. That's how you can use self-brain surgery. Now, if you can't get it done on your own because the disorder's too severe, the trauma's too hard, the tragedy's too much, the grief is too fresh, whatever it is, if you can't get it done on your own, get some help. That's what help is for, okay? That's what therapy's for. That's what medication's for when you need it, okay? Be careful with that. But hear me say, if you can't process this on your own and get the help that you need, go get some help. But this process, ultimately, nobody can do the work of therapy for you. As Anne Lamott says, there's almost nothing outside of you that can help in any meaningful way unless you're waiting for a donor organ, right? Like everything has to happen inside of you. So even if it requires therapy, psychiatry, brain surgery, whatever it is, you still at some point have to become responsible for pulling the trigger on how you're going to respond, how you're going to live your life. So I must believe, commandment number 4, that my mind is in charge of my brain, regardless of the underlying situation with my brain. My mind is still in charge of it. And that is when the 5th commandment becomes most critical. I must believe that self-brain surgery is not a metaphor. It's the mechanism of how I change my mind and change my life. It's not a metaphor, friend. The wiring changes inside the wall when you ask it to with your mind. And we're almost done with this episode. So I want you to scrub out of this operation. We started with scrubbing in. We're going to scrub out now. And I want you to get ready to apply this in your life. So just imagine the first 5 commandments that we just went through as steps up out of your current life. Okay, whatever's been going on in your life, you're going to take some steps up. I must not participate in my own demise. I know that feelings aren't facts. I know that not all thoughts are true. I know that my mind is in charge of my brain. And I know that self-brain surgery is not a metaphor. It's the mechanism of how I can change my mind and change my life. Imagine those steps up to a high vantage point. Like we said, in the old operating rooms of yesterday, they had a theater, an amphitheater up above the operating room. And people could sit up there and watch surgery. They could observe. So students and residents could observe the master surgeons and the professors operating. So imagine you can go up and watch your life playing out, operating, if you will. And you can look down on your life, make that subject-object shift, like get up in the balcony like we talked about earlier, and look down at your life objectively and think for a second with intention, because remember, your microtubules are waiting for you to pay attention and direct intentionally what you want your brain to care about and what you want to accomplish with your brain and your body and your life. So just think with intention for a moment about how you're now going to be able to use the patchbay concept that I've given you to make positive changes to your brain, your body, your life, and through epigenetics, your generations, and through quantum entanglement and heart math and electromagnetic fields, the people around you in your world, okay? The last 5 commandments will guide you. The 6th commandment, I must love tomorrow more than I hate how I feel right now. So if I'm frustrated and stressed right now, I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to medicate myself. I'm not going to turn on Netflix and check out because I want to do the work now so that I can have tomorrow be unburdened by what's going on right now. I'm not going to drag today into tomorrow by numbing myself. The 7th commandment, I must stop making an operation of everything. I got to stop beating myself up and thinking it's all my fault and stop blaming my parents and stop wondering about the past and stop stressing out so much about not seeing the progress I want to see. And just say, God gave me a mind-brain interface that is designed to work. And if I can't get it all done by myself, I'm going to go get whatever help I need. But I'm going to stop beating myself up and making operation out of everything. And the 8th commandment, I must not perpetuate or start harmful generational thought or behavioral issues in my life or my family. I'm going to stop dragging whatever my parents did or whatever happened when I was 9 years old or whatever I did that was so bad that I feel ashamed of now. I'm going to stop dragging that stuff into my life. And I'm going to stop yelling at my kids. I'm going to stop teaching my kids to just pass on the abuse I received if I was gone through something inappropriate from a parent or a relative, or if a family I grew up in was bad, or if a coach did something bad to me. I don't have to use what happened to me as a way to be bitter and angry and beat up my family going forward. I don't have to say, well, my granddad was like that and my dad was like that, so I got to be like that to you. I'm sorry, kid, but I'm just going to gripe at you when I'm unhappy. I don't have to do that anymore. So the 8th commandment, rather, is I don't have to, and I must not pass on these harmful generational thought or behavioral issues in my life or my family. We're going to break those generational curses with the power of self-brain surgery. Okay, that's what the Bible says. The negative stuff will persist a few generations, but the positive stuff will persist for thousands of generations. And the ninth commandment, I have to believe that I'm getting better at what I'm doing. That wiring, those microtubules are waiting for you to change how they form. They will keep forming the same old, same old. If you're going to keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep getting what you've been getting. But if you change, immediately, those microtubules within seconds will start getting better at getting better. And isn't it better to get better than to just stay bitter and broken and to try to blame somebody else for it, friend? It's better to get better. And the 10th commandment, I must understand that thoughts become things. Like literally, your thinking turns into structural elements in your brain. And everything that happens in the world around you started with the thoughts. So you get your thoughts cleaned up. You get your thoughts under your command. You biopsy them. 2 Corinthians 10:5 again. Take your thoughts captive. Don't let the world tell you what you need to think and feel and care about and believe. And don't let the world convince you that you should just follow your heart or that you should just be your true self. You say, no. I don't like the way I have been. That life isn't working for me. So I understand that if I think different thoughts, I'll get different structural things happening in my brain. The wiring will change. The outlets will get better. The patchbay will work for me. And I must believe that. And it's true. And it's not a metaphor. So I want to leave you with 3 scriptures, okay? And if you're not a believer, it's okay. These ideas will still be helpful to you. The neuroscience is solid. Whether or not you're a believer, the neuroscience will work on your behalf. So here they are. 1 Corinthians 13:9 and 10. And I like the New Living Translation here. 1 Corinthians 13:9 and 10. Now our knowledge is partial and incomplete, and even the gift of prophecy reveals only part of the whole picture. But when the time of perfection comes, these partial things will become useless. Now, what I want you to understand is that science always progresses forward. And even the things that we think we know really well in science right now, if you think back in history, no great scientific idea has lasted more than about 200 years before everybody understands that we didn't fully know or understand it, or that the way we thought it was isn't how it actually is. Every great idea in science gets replaced eventually as we learn more, as we develop better technology to detect things and look at things and study things on a deeper level. Before we had microscopes and telescopes, we only had our naked eye, and we only knew so much about the universe and the world around us. And what the Bible says is that's how your whole life is. There's certain things that you don't know, and then over time, God reveals more and more to you, and you become a little bit more perfect in understanding certain things. But once you know it, you're now responsible for it. You can't lean on the old excuse of not understanding something anymore once you know. And the rest of that passage, 1 Corinthians 13:12, I like the NIV here. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, but then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. You see what he's saying here? Paul is talking in 2 different ways of saying it, that there's a lot of stuff that we didn't know before. And as our lives play out, slowly but surely, God reveals things to us. We get smarter, we learn more. It's just like with your kids, okay? I have a granddaughter who's 1 year old, and I have another granddaughter who's 12 years old. And we interact with the 12-year-old a lot differently than we do the 1-year-old, okay? The 12-year-old can ride the 4x4 around the property. The 12-year-old can saddle a horse and ride. But I would never just slap my 1-year-old up on the back of a horse and smack the horse in the bottom and let him run off into the field, because that 1-year-old is going to fall off and get hurt because she's not ready for that. She's not ready to operate a horse. She's not ready to drive a side-by-side around the property, right? The 12-year-old can do that. The 1-year-old can't. That's exactly how our lives play out, okay? Science reveals things. We figure stuff out. God opens our minds and our eyes up to new things as time goes on. And eventually, we know a little bit more. And today, I've given you a little bit more of that knowledge. You are understanding on a deeper level that you are not stuck with the brain you have. Your brain is constantly changing, and it changes in a large degree by waiting to hear what you want it to think about, care about, and do. This verse, Ecclesiastes 3:11 in the NIV, he has made everything beautiful in its time. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. No one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Particle physics is the study of the subatomic particles that make up the universe. A long time ago, we thought atoms were the smallest thing. Newton and all those guys 300 years ago thought that atoms were the essential building block of everything in the universe. Then we figured out through quantum physics and the study of small things in the early part of the 20th century that atoms were composed of particles, protons and neutrons and electrons. And for a long time, they thought that those three particles were the elementary particles that made up everything. And then particle physics figured out that protons, neutrons, and electrons are made up, guess what, of other particles, quarks and gluons and other things. And guess what? Now they're starting to suggest that there's even smaller particles. There's particles called anomalons, and there's particles called polaritons and excitons, and there's all these subatomic particles. So what's happening is science is figuring out over and over that we will never get to the last doll in the set of nesting dolls, because every time we open one up, there's a whole new universe of things to study and know out there. So God is slowly revealing himself and how things work to us as we develop the ability to understand more. And science is slowly unraveling some of the secrets of how things really work, but we'll never know it all. And the wonderful thing is that we don't have to. We've learned a lot today, and I want you to know that how things have been does not have to be how they continue to be for you. Use the patchbay. Set your attention on the right things. Set your intention and be very clear in the instructions you're giving to your microtubules into your brain. You are already changing. And so direct those changes in ways that help you and don't hurt you, because you're worth the effort, my friend. Next time on the podcast, Friday, we have a wonderful and vulnerable conversation with Olympic gold medalist Steve Messler. Steve's been on the show before. In the first episode, we talked about performance and achievement and how he got to the Olympics and how to become a better performer in your own life and all that great stuff. This time, we talked about the mental health struggles that can plague even the highest performers among us. Don't miss that one. Frontal Lobe Friday is coming with Olympic gold medalist Steve Messler. Listen, friend, I want you to become healthier and feel better and be happier. I want you to get unsad, unsick, unstressed, and unstuck. I want you to stop settling for less than God designed your life to be. I want you to believe that you can't change your mind until you change your life. And I want you to know that there's some very good news that you can start today. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm Dr. Lee Warren, your host, and this has been another episode of the Self-Brain Surgery Podcast, where we smash neuroscience and faith together to radically transform our lives. Please be sure and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, share it with a friend, and make sure you sign up for my newsletter, drleewarren.substack.com, drleewarren.substack.com. Every Sunday since 2014, I've been bringing you my best prescriptions for how you can change your mind and change your life. The power of faith and neuroscience working together. Listen, friend, you can't change your life until you change your mind. And the good news is you can start today. I'm Dr. Lee Warren. We'll see you next time. God bless you.